see the shape of the box lid, excuse me, the box cavity. One thing that's unique about this rifle is that it has a concave profile to the box cavity rather than being rectangular, and it's that concave profile that actually retains the lid that holds the dovetail. So this is the design that was used on the original rifle. This gun is patterned after. It seems to work very well. I think it's a little less susceptible to humidity changes in terms of the box being held or jammed in the stock when humidity changes. I think this is a little more forgiving. It seems to work quite well. Again, the butt plate will already be installed when you receive your rifle. The notch for the box cover is already cut. It'll slide in there just like this. So the only thing that's left to be done is install the patch box spring. So we're going to do that. Sometimes there's a little burr on the inside of the edge of the butt plate where the spring catches. So the spring will sit in here like this, and it'll actually catch on the inside lip of the butt plate. And sometimes there's a little bit of a burr on there. We'll just go ahead and make sure there's no burr on there. That should work. The spring gets installed, so the countersink is up. Let's push it in. Take a wood screw. The wood screw, I'm going to take a little bit of wax as well. It makes it go in easier. Get started here. Once it's started, we can go, but it takes a second to get that started. Hole's already in for the screw, so it should be good to go now. Now, with any luck, when we put this in, it'll click in place. We'll see if it will. So no click. Well, it did. It's retaining it, but it's a little bit tight. There, it clicked. No play forward and aft. Works well. Can't ask for anything better than that. So let's go ahead and put the sights. Well, we'll take the barrel out. We'll do the nose cap, and then we'll do the sights. Remove the lock first before we take the barrel out. Loosen up the lock bolts. And an easy way is to just tap the lock bolts. Helps you push the lock out of the mortise. Pull out the lock bolts. We'll take out the tang bolt. And then we're going to remove the barrel. And here's a good way to remove the barrel. Hold the stock upside down. Your right hand, squeeze it reasonably tight at the muzzle. Kind of have it resting in your other hand. Tap it like this, and the barrel will start to pull out of the stock. And then you can kind of help it as it goes down the barrel. It's better than picking it up by the muzzle. Set the barrel aside. Now we're going to move on to the nose cap. Again, we'll make sure there's no chips or anything in the inlet, which looks pretty good. So the nose cap is machined, so it should fit the stock and the barrel very well. It also already has the mounting holes, drilled and tapped holes to mount it. And there's the holes in the stock for those mounting holes, mounting screws. So the nose cap is simply slid on the stock. Should rest up against the inlet very well, which it does. So by that I mean doing a nice tight fit between the wood and the metal. Which appears to be a very nice fit. You can also give it a little, if you want, sometimes you can give it a little tap like that. Doesn't really even need it. Then we'll take the 2 brass screws that are included. These in here. Use our screwdriver once again. Snug those down. You don't have to get crazy with them, but snug them down. You could probably tighten it enough you could break the stock, so don't get crazy with it. And we're going to do the other one. Sometimes it's difficult to get it started here, but I think we can. Come on, baby. There we go. I think it's going in there. There we go. Okay. So we can see that there's a nice fit between the wood and the brass. Now, you can leave the screws like this while you're building it, because you might want to take it off and polish it up, although it's probably best to polish it on the gun. But at least for final assembly, what we recommend is to file these screws so they're just a tiny bit above the surface of the nose cap, maybe 32nd, maybe a little less, and then peen the screws slightly, and that'll lock the screws down to the nose cap, and the threaded fasteners won't be visible then if you go. We'll just leave it like this for now in case I want to take this off, which I may want to at some point during the build. Now, with any luck again, the barrel should fit the nose cap without any fiddling around. We'll try that again. Move this forward. See. Oh, there it went. Okay, so check the fit. So by fit I mean the fit of the nose cap to the barrel. So along this side you can see the fit. Very nice. Check the fit on the other end too. Looks pretty good. Gonna give it just a little tap to make sure it's seated down. So it looks pretty good as well. So now the nose cap is installed. Let's go ahead and put the rest of it back together. Let's put the barrel bolt, tang bolt back in, the lock back in. Notice how I even have my thumb here. It's not by accident, it's right by the bolt. So your screwdriver should slip, it's not going to fall down. You know, little things like that you'll get the hang of. So that's in. Put the lock in. You can do this in a vise too, but I'm just holding on to it while I'm doing it. Okay, so that's in. So next, I think what we'll do is we'll put the barrel pins in. So we mentioned the underlugs or little tenons that protrude from the bottom of the barrel. Those are what holds the barrel to the stock. They have a slot in, and there's a pin that goes through the stock, through that slot, and retains the barrel in the stock. So we'll go ahead and get some pins. I have some that are already cut up. Grab some here. And again, a little bit of wax is always good. Make the pin go in easier. So everything should line up. That's through. Okay, barrel is mounted to the stock now. Once again, these are left long so you can take the gun apart easily while you're staining it and finishing it or carving it or whatever. And then at the end, you'll cut these so the end of the pin is just slightly below the wood surface and round over the pin. So what do we have left? We have to install the sights. And I think we have to put together a ramrod and install it. And it looks to me like that's about it. I have an extra trigger here, but that was one that must have been in the parts bag I grabbed. So we've got a rear sight, front sight, ramrod tip, and a pin to hold the ramrod on.
And this brass?
So this piece of brass is included in the kit if somebody wants to put on a piece of brass on the end of the patch box. Now, I would recommend, unless you're familiar with that work, to avoid it because it can be tricky to do. And in my opinion, if it is done less than well, it looks worse than not having a piece of brass. Some original rifles had brass on the end, some didn't. But often what I see is people putting brass piece on the end, it usually doesn't turn out that great, so I would avoid it. Maybe I'll do a video on the steps to make a nice brass piece on the end of a box. But we include a piece in case you're up for it and want to do it. So the sights, rear sight and front sight. Rear sight has a little gate on the bottom that needs to be filed completely flush before we install it. So we're going to take the gun out of the vise. We're going to clamp this up in the vise so we can file off that little gate. The little gate is just that little round protrusion that sticks up there. So let's take a file, just a single cut file. The idea is to cut that down and keep the bottom still pretty flat. You can see I'm kind of hitting all over. You don't have to keep on filing, that's enough. The gate doesn't stick up. Might as well just stop there. So I'm using what's often referred to as a parrot vise. I think the originals that were built were Versa Vices. They were built in Ohio, in Orrville, Ohio, I believe. They quit making those years ago, and you know, these are import vices, but they work pretty good. They're pretty affordable, work well. I have a jaw for the front. You can see it's not rectangular, but has a bit of a peak to it, the one side. That allows it to pivot when you tighten up the vise, because not everything on a gun, or very few things, are parallel. So the ability for that front jaw to pivot works well. It's lined with leather. It's a piece of leather on the movable jaw and the fixed jaw. So they work pretty well. One thing I don't like is when you buy them, they have a locking mechanism where you're supposed to tighten up the handle and it locks it and keeps it from pivoting. It doesn't seem to hold very well, so we just put a drill and tap for a little screw that locks to keep the vise from pivoting. It works a little better. So put the gun in the vise again. You could also do this work with the barrel out. It'd probably be a little easier with the barrel out, but there's nothing wrong with doing it like this. So we need to install the sight in the pre-cut dovetail. We're going to see how close it is. So this is always something that we struggle with a little bit here, is to not make the dovetails too big, but make them as close as we can for the sights. These sights are castings, they vary a little bit in size, so we do have to make the slots that are machined in the barrel just a tiny bit undersized in order that it'll work with all the sights. So there's a couple ways to then make the sight fit the dovetail. One is to use a three-cornered file. So this is a triangular file. And in this case, there's just teeth on one side of this file. That allows you to put the side with no teeth down in the cutout, in the dovetail, and then you can just slide the file back and forth to open up the size of that inlet a little bit. You can make a file like this by getting a three-cornered file and grinding the teeth off. Just make sure it's a fairly fine file that comes to a nice point. So we can demonstrate that technique. I would just come in here and I'll just file. This file is getting a little bit dull, but it's still will cut. So this is one technique. Just go this and just open it up until the sight will just start to slide in there, and it's still a little bit tight right now. So using this technique, you go a little bit further. Now let's say you don't have a three-cornered file that's going to work well for this process. Another way is to cut the sight down a little bit. So I would recommend cutting this surface down a little bit. You can see it's angled, so it's a dovetail shape. So we'll just keep that same angle and we'll cut this surface down a little bit. We can just use a regular flat file for that process. And again, it's best to put it in the vise so you can control it a little better. You want to take this slow, because if you go too fast, you'll probably take too much and then it'll be loose. So got it in there, and I'm going to go over here like this. It's kind of hard to see, I know. But I'm just going to pick up that angle and file that same angle just a little more. Now again, like I said, I don't want to go too far or else it'll be too loose. Then it'll look silly. I like to install my sights from the side plate side towards the lock side. Okay, that's starting to go in. It's looking pretty good, so it started to go in just with thumb pressure about that far. Which that's a good sign. So when I tap it, it'll probably get a little tighter. I'm using just this little piece of dowel. You know, we supply the ramrods extra length so you can cut a little piece off the end and use as a dowel to tap your sights in and out. So the ramrod generally ends up being flush at the end of the barrel. So we're going to tap this in. You don't want it too tight. If it's too tight, it can actually flex the barrel. Because if you think about it, expanding the top of the barrel, it could actually bow the barrel a little bit. That's very nice. That degree of snugness there. It's not going to move just through normal use, but it's not too tight either. So that's good. Installed. Now we're going to do the same with the front sight. Go ahead and turn this around. Probably be a little easier. So the front sight is installed in this orientation. See, so the highest point is towards the front. I sometimes see people have them on backwards. Not correct. That's the correct orientation. So we need to, again, make sure it'll fit the inlet, the dovetail. We'll see if it is or not. So it's starting to go. A little tight though. So in this case, I'm just going to use the 3-cornered file. Open it up a little bit. Okay. Let's see if that'll work. Okay, that's going in there now. Tap it. Well, that's pretty good. Make sure it's all the way seated and down and good. The sight is a little wider than the barrel. I like to make it a little bit closer to the width of the barrel so it doesn't stick out quite so far. You'll probably find it best to sight the gun in first because it may have to be drifted right or left, and then trim the sides of the sight. Sometimes on originals they're flush with the side of the barrel. Sometimes they stick out a tiny bit. I would probably prefer them to stick out just a tiny bit. That's all there is to it.